Chapter 29. The Sign in His Hand. The year was 1946. After William Branham told his wife about the angel's commission, he immediately called on his former pastor. Dr. Roy Davis was now bishop over all the missionary Baptist churches in that section of Indiana. Although Bill and Dr. Davis had vented some disagreements in the past, Bill still respected the older man's judgment and considered him as his overseer. And now, more than any other time in his life, Bill needed some good advice. The angel had painted for him a fantastic picture of a worldwide ministry, but had not given him a clue as to where he should begin or what direction he should travel. Perhaps the Lord wanted him to start within the framework of the Missionary Baptist Church. If so, then Dr. Davis could help him get started. Sitting in the bishop's study, Bill described his former anguish and depression over the thought that the devil might be influencing his life. He told of how yesterday a maple tree had seemed to come apart on him, and how he had resolved to enter the woods and never come out until God met him and delivered him from his agony. He told Dr. Davis about the whirling ball of fire that supernaturally lit the cabin where he was praying, and the angel who stepped into view. He described the angel's visage, and then began to share what the angel had told him, how he would pray for kings and rulers, and how people would come to him from all over the world for counsel. At this point, Dr. Davis interrupted and brusquely gave his verdict. "Billy, what did you eat for supper that night? You obviously had a nightmare." Bill felt smitten. "Dr. Davis, I don't appreciate that at all." The older man raised his arm and brushed the remark aside. "Oh, go home and forget about it, Billy. It's just another one of those hallucinations you see. You've got an overactive imagination." "Dr. Davis, you might tell me to forget about it, but God has anchored something down inside my heart. If you don't want to have me, there are others out there who will. I am under obligation to God to preach to the world." Seeing how serious this young man seemed to be taking this story about an angelic visitation, Dr. Davis tried to reason with him. "Billy, you mean to tell me you'll be going around the world and winning thousands to Christ? You, with your 7th grade education?" "That is what he told me, and that is what I believe." "How are you going to do it?" "I don't know. I was hoping you would have some helpful suggestions." Dr. Davis chuckled. "My suggestion is that you go home and take a long nap. Maybe you'll be more sensible when you wake up. Do you really think you could meet an educated world with such a theology of divine healing?" "It's not my divine healing," countered Bill. "It's God's promise. He's the one that gave me this commission." Dr. Davis was not impressed. "Do you really think people will believe you?" "That's not my business," said Bill, undaunted. "It's my business to stay true to that word." "Billy, if you preach such a thing as that, you'll be preaching to the posts that hold up the roof of your church." "I'll be preaching God's word to the posts then, because God is able of those posts to raise up children unto Abraham. If God is sending me, there's going to be somebody out there who will believe it." Bill left Dr. Davis's house still determined and committed to follow the angel's commission, regardless of the consequences or difficulties. Nevertheless, the bishop's ridicule had left a tiny sliver of doubt in his heart that festered and nagged at him for the rest of the week. After all, it did seem like a preposterous dream. How could he, lowly Billy Branham, take a gift of divine healing to the peoples of the world? Looking at it logically, it did seem unlikely. On Friday afternoon, Bill walked down to Mason's drugstore on Spring Street to cash his weekly $28 paycheck and to pick up some baby bottles and rubber nipples so 6-week-old Rebecca could start sucking catnip tea. Bill had just gotten off work and was still dressed in his game department uniform. As he approached the store, a bus from Louisville stopped at the corner to unload its passengers. Most of the people got off the bus with purpose and moved away quickly, but one man did not. This man set his suitcase down on the sidewalk and scanned his surroundings as though bewildered to be there. When his eyes reached Bill, the man stared with the strangest expression on his face. Entering Mason's drugstore to do his business, Bill forgot all about the peculiar man outside. When he came back out, he saw that the man had picked up his suitcase and walked toward the drugstore. The man saw Bill again and stopped, staring at Bill with the same bewildered look on his face. For a moment, Bill fancied the man might want to rob him. Then Bill realized that that was ridiculous, since it was daytime on a busy intersection and Bill was wearing a gun in his belt in plain view. Bill turned to head up the street. Momentarily, he felt a hand touch his shoulder. Turning back around, he found that it was the enigmatic stranger. "Excuse me," the man said. "Are you an officer?" "I'm a conservation officer," Bill replied. "I work for the Indiana State Game Department." The man spoke haltingly, as though unsure of himself. "I'm, looking to find, a certain person. Maybe you could help me. Are you, well acquainted around here?" "I've lived here practically all my life," said Bill. "Who are you trying to find?" Now the man's face took on that strange look of bewilderment again. "I'm not quite sure. You might think I'm crazy. But let me tell you my story. I live in Paducah, Kentucky, about 200 miles downriver from here. For about 2 years, I've been failing in health. Earlier this week, I had a dream where I saw a big, bright angel come down from heaven and tell me to go to Jeffersonville, Indiana, and ask for somebody by the name of Branham to pray for me. Do you know anyone around here by the name of Branham?" Bill's heart pounded so hard with excitement it felt like it would leap right out of his chest. He said, "My mother runs a boarding house around the corner. Her name is Branham." "Oh, she's Branham. Would that be your name, too?" "Brother," said Bill, putting his arm around the stranger's shoulders, "earlier this week I was sitting in a cabin when a great light came shining in, and an angel told me to go and pray for the sick." The man broke down and cried. Bill took off his hat, and together they knelt on the street corner and asked God to give the man back his health. When Bill finished praying and opened his eyes, he saw that pedestrians had stopped. Men stood with their hats off in respect, and women kept their children quiet. Bill felt like the needle of God had just pricked his skin and deftly removed that tiny sliver of doubt forever. Now he was certain that God was sending him, and if God was sending him, God would make a way for him to go. When Bill walked into church that Sunday, the first thing he heard was a new song his congregation was singing. He liked what he heard. It was destined to become his theme song. The rhythm followed a simple but beautiful pattern. As Bill listened to the people repeating the chorus with its many variations, he felt the presence of the angel of the Lord draw near, as though the angel liked this song too. Only believe, all things are possible, only believe. Jesus is here, Jesus is here, all things are possible, Jesus is here. Lord, I believe, all things are possible, Lord, I believe. That Sunday, Bill faced his congregation and without a sliver of doubt in his mind, boldly shared all that the angel had told him. He said, "There will be thousands of people come here from all over the country. They'll crowd you out. You won't find a seat unless you're sincere with God and come early." His congregation believed him, including one man named Charlie McDowell. Monday at work, Charlie flash-burned his eyes while welding. His doctors assured him the blindness would be temporary, lasting only 8 to 10 days. But Charlie called Bill to pray for him anyway. The next morning, Charlie saw well enough to return to work. His boss, Mr. Morgan, surprised to see Charlie back on the job so soon, questioned him about it. Charlie explained that Jesus had answered his pastor's prayer. Mr. Morgan said, "I wonder if your pastor's prayers would help my wife. She's in the Baptist hospital dying with cancer." Charlie answered, "I don't know, but why don't you bring her to church Wednesday night and find out?" Morgan's wife, Margie, a registered nurse for 21 years, had been dying of cancer for many months. She had suffered through multiple X-ray treatments, but all to no avail. The doctors performed exploratory surgery and found cancer ravaging her body from her breast down. The cancer was so severe it had wrapped itself around her intestinal tract like the roots of a tree around a sewer pipe. Sewing her back up, the doctors gave the only prognosis they could. There was no hope for her whatsoever. At the Wednesday night service, Mr. Morgan carried his wife into church on a stretcher. She was barely conscious. Bill looked with pity on the wasted woman. She mumbled deliriously as she twitched from the pain. Bill took her right hand in his left hand, just like the angel said he should do. His wrist and lower arm tingled. His hand puffed up slightly and turned an angry red. Small white bumps appeared in a pattern across the back of his hand. He could feel vibrations moving up his arm, passing through his shoulder, moving across his chest, all the way to his heart. Looking up at Mr. Morgan, Bill asked, "What is wrong with the woman?" "She's dying with cancer," said Mr. Morgan. "Can you help her?" Bill thought of the angel's words, "If you will be sincere and can get the people to believe you, nothing will stand before your prayer, not even cancer." Bill looked at Mr. Morgan in the eyes. "Sir, I believe that God can heal her. The question is, do you believe it?" "Yes," came Mr. Morgan's reply. Bill closed his eyes and asked for the woman's healing in the name of Jesus Christ. Suddenly the throbbing in his left arm stopped. Bill opened his eyes and was surprised to see that his left hand was now as normal as his right. At that moment, he saw a vision of Mrs. Morgan dressed in a nurse's uniform attending to patients in a hospital. Bill stood up and declared, "Sir, don't you fear, for thus saith the Lord, your wife will live." Margie Morgan's doctor, who had accompanied her to the church, protested, "I beg your pardon, Reverend Branham, but that cancer is squeezing her intestines so tightly that we can't even wash her out with an enema. I don't care what problem she has. I saw a vision of her nursing patients in a hospital again. That man who met me in the woods said that whatever I saw, I should say it just that way, and it would be so. And I believe him." The next day, Margie Morgan was fully conscious and in her right mind. By Friday, her appetite had returned, along with some of her strength. On Saturday, much to her doctor's utter astonishment, she walked the halls of the hospital, begging to go home.